Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first IAJGS live interview on the IAJGS YouTube channel. I am Jarrett Ross, one of the IAJGS board directors of the board. And today I'm very happy to have with me Jennifer Mendelsohn and Adina Newman from the Holocaust Reunion Project. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. To get started, just so everyone knows, I know this is the first one on YouTube, so if you have any questions, you just want to chat along, please put all of that into the chat. This is going to be a very interactive live stream. So to start out, if I could just have both of you kind of just introduce yourselves and tell us about your genealogy journeys.
All right, I'm going to go first this time. We always struggle to decide who goes first. So I'm Adina Newman. I am a co-founder and lead genealogist of the Holocaust Reunion Project. Outside of that, because we're going to talk a lot more about the project, you might be able to see me on social media as My Family Genie. I spend a lot of time on social media, especially Instagram. And basically, I'm a professional Jewish genealogist and that specializes in genetic genealogy and all that entails. And my full-time job is helping Holocaust survivors and their family reunite with lost family and history. So, we're really excited to talk about that today and, answer any questions people might have about the program.
Hi, well, I am Jennifer Mendelsohn. I am also a professional Jewish genealogist. I am a New Yorker, but by birth, but have lived for the past 20 odd years in Baltimore. And I came to genealogy relatively recently in genealogy years, which I think are like dog years sometimes. I've been doing genealogy since 2013. Kind of fell into it accidentally and immediately got hooked, as some people do, kind of expanded my repertoire into working with DNA. And for the past 2.5 years have partnered with Adina on the project we're going to present to you today, the Holocaust Reunion Project.
Awesome. Well, speaking of that, how did it get started? What led to the Holocaust Reunion Project?
So, Jennifer and I had been working together all online. People always laughed that we hadn't met in person, but all online for a few years because we were administering the Jewish DNA Facebook group. So we talked a lot about lots of things. And I know for me, one day it might have had to do with something, maybe there was something in the news, something related to investigative genetic genealogy, because I also volunteer with the DNA Doe Project. I don't know what it was, but something clicked in my head. And I thought, the Holocaust community, we're dealing with at-risk history here. Is there anyone giving them DNA tests? Is there anyone helping them? Because what better use of this technology than helping Holocaust survivors? And, I kind of ruminated on this maybe for a little bit. And then I called Jennifer. It was very rare that I actually would talk to Jennifer on the phone. Usually it was all, via Messenger. And I said, Jennifer, is there anything out there where people are getting Holocaust survivors DNA tests or helping them? I've been really thinking about this. And she said, no, there isn't. And I've been thinking about it also, want to do it together. So that's kind of, our origin story, very serendipitous that we came to this separately, but, we had a common mission. And then Jennifer can kind of talk about, what went from there, because that was just the beginning.
Yeah, well, I'll rewind a little bit. For me, slightly before that phone call from Adina, the aha moment was I had been volunteering on one of these cases for someone, a Holocaust survivor with unknown parentage. And I was happy to do the work and donate my time. But at some point I was purchasing additional DNA tests for target testers. I was purchasing records. And one day, the light bulb went on over my head. And I just thought, surely there is somebody who could help us do this on a larger scale. Like, I should not be paying out of pocket to do this. And wouldn't it be great if there were like a program that, with donations could help us do this work for lots of people, just not one-on-one. And I had sort of been kicking around that idea and had, put out a couple of feelers, but never really did anything with it. And then the phone rang that day and I was like, okay, this is my sign. The universe is speaking to me. We got to make this happen. So we did. And, to this day, like if the program were to close this afternoon, I would still be really proud of us that we made this pie in the sky thing happen out of nothing, essentially. We just sort of, networked and looked around and thought, how can we make this happen? And we launched a pilot program at the end of 2022. And got it going and started sending out kits to survivors, which was super exciting to us. And we kind of reorganized in middle of last year, and we became a full-fledged independent nonprofit, and just have kept the work going. And it is super exciting. We've tested at this point over 1,400 survivors all over the world. And I think we should point out that we have sort of a few different things that we do. We realized that for a number of reasons, Holocaust survivors could really benefit from DNA testing, because so many lines of communication were severed during the Holocaust that it is not at all uncommon for a DNA test to make instant connection between family members who were separated. And we felt like every survivor alive should have that opportunity. But we also know as genetic genealogists that DNA can be an unbelievably powerful tool for solving cases of unknown identity. But because of the vagaries of working with Jewish DNA and familiarity with Holocaust records, there was sort of a hole in the universe where people who had cases of unknown parentage connected to the Holocaust didn't have anyone who could solve those cases. And we wanted to sort of function as like a central resource where a lot of those cases were sort of farmed to us by word of mouth, but we wanted it to be known like, oh, if you have a case of unknown parentage related to the Holocaust, we're the people who can solve it. So that's the story.
So if somebody has unknown parentage due to the Holocaust, what would they need to do to be involved in the project?
So, you reach out to us, basically. We have our email, we have a website. Our email, our website is holocaustreunions.org. Our email is info@holocaustreunions.org, but it just kind of depends where people are in the process. So sometimes people have already taken a DNA test and they come to us, and we do all the informed consent forms and things like that. But we really encourage people, first of all, to be at every major DNA platform with an unknown parentage case, because you never know where your best matches are going to be. We have an in-kind donation from Ancestry. So we primarily provide Ancestry DNA kits to survivors and their children. That is who is eligible for our services. So we do that. And then, we upload to MyHeritage, FTDNA. Sometimes we get them at 23andMe. It just really depends on the case. So if you meet this criteria, and Jennifer and I can give you plenty of examples of unknown parentage that we've worked with, and those were kind of our preliminary cases working together on this before we really even launched the program officially. That's kind of how we get started. But, Jennifer really talked about two of the prongs of our mission with, giving out these tests and being sort of that central, that clearinghouse for everybody to help with these cases. But the third is really education. And we really want people to know that there's not some great chasm that you can't access records or find things. I think, one of the consequences of the Holocaust, besides obvious, losing 6 million people, is people lost their histories and their ability to, connect with family. Plenty of times we have people who think they have no one left and they take a test and they didn't realize that their grandmother had a brother who immigrated to the United States before the Holocaust and had a whole family, right? So we're trying to, reestablish those connections. And we've done it, we don't like to oversell what we offer, but I think have 100% success rate in finding a relative for somebody or records for somebody to really give them some closure when they thought there was nothing else to be had.
And you've had a couple of news articles about some of the cases that you've both solved. So can you talk about some of those cases?
Yeah,
sure.
One, our first right out of the gate case that before we even established the project. So Jennifer, go.
Sure. The first case we worked on together was the case of Jackie Young. And Jackie Young is a British survivor who has spoken about his story many times over the years. He has an incredible story, as all these stories are. Jackie grew up in the UK, and at some point in his childhood, he learned that he was adopted. But it was not until he was 21 years old when he went to get married. And in the UK, you need to, provide proof of your Jewishness to get married in a synagogue. That he discovered the circumstances of his adoption, which his parents had kept from him. And that was that Jackie was actually an orphan who had spent the first 3 years of his life in Theresienstadt, the concentration camp. He had no recollection of this whatsoever, mercifully. But of course, once he learned that, he wanted to know more about his biological parents. And he was able to find his birth certificate. He was born in Vienna in 1941. But the birth certificate only mentioned the name of his mother. There was no father listed. And as Adina and I like to say, there is not a document in the universe that will tell you the name of Jackie Young's biological father. The only way to find it is through DNA. So Jackie crossed our paths when he appeared in a Times of Israel article that mentioned that he had just been on a television show in the UK called DNA Family Secrets. And they had attempted to solve this big mystery for him. Part of it was that he was fearful that perhaps his father was actually a Nazi, and that's why he had been spared in the concentration camp. And they reassured him that he was fully Jewish, and they introduced him to some cousins on his father's side, but they were unable to identify his father definitively. And Adina and I both read it and said, let's figure out exactly who his father is. Like when we do unknown parent work, we bring it all the way home. We whenever we can, we take it as far as we can. So through the network of Jewish genealogy, we were able to connect to Jackie. We started work. We took a look at his results. We started working, and within a few days, we had a very likely candidate for the man that we suspected was his biological father. It took a target test to a man in the US to confirm that we had identified the right man. And we did. We sent him the test. The results came back, and they were first cousins once removed. He's Jackie's closest living biological relative. So that was really powerful. And, Jackie, not only did we, once we identified his father, we were able to build Jackie a very comprehensive tree going back many generations. And it's very sweet because he now has it printed out and framed in his office behind him. So this man who's lived for, decades, he's 83 years old, now has the comfort of knowing where he comes from and who both of his parents were.
Wow, it's so amazing how powerful these stories really are, and I can't imagine the feeling of the moment when you kind of reveal the information. Can you talk about some of that, even if it's not necessarily that case, but just some of those moments of when you finally reveal?
Yeah, I mean, in that case, I remember we took a picture of the Zoom call that we had with him, and his wife joins him all the time. We love them. And I just remember he was just so blown away at the information. And but he has a wonderful sense of humor and just takes everything in stride. He's just I mean, they're my favorite couple, the two of them. And we were fortunate enough because IAJGS was in London, the year before last. That was the first time Jennifer and I met in person, which people couldn't believe because we're doing this whole venture without actually, being in the same room. But we also got to meet Jackie and his wife, Lita, in person. And that was kind of the highlight of that week for us. And we took another picture. And it's, just for us, this is what we're supposed to be doing right now. We lose survivors every day. I just saw something in the news that the oldest survivor in the world or something just passed away. I always say we need to give these tests out yesterday because we've had the experience where people will take a test with us and then they'll pass away shortly after. And it's horrible. And that's, we can't necessarily give them the closure, but their DNA is there and their families can benefit from it. And maybe we can give them some closure also because, we have the survivors, but anyone who's a 2G, 3G, whatever, anyone who descends and even just the whole community who knows survivors, everyone's affected. So just to give kind of closure and hope to the community is something we definitely want to be doing.
Are you finding that you're testing a lot of those, children and grandchildren of the survivors?
So we don't test grandchildren. We will give tests to children if their survivor parent is not able to, whether they've passed away or, they need to be able. We require that all survivors can consent. So even if, their child has power of attorney or something like that, we don't give a test in that instance. We need everybody to know what they're getting into.
How many cases have y'all worked again? I think you mentioned it before, but
I mean, we've given out over probably like 1,500 kits at this point. We had a little boost in the UK, a lot of UK testers recently.
We did an event with the Association for Jewish Refugees there, and our inbox was flooded with requests, which makes us happy.
Yes, makes us we love it. So we've probably given out tests. Not everyone always wants our services after that. So maybe they have family who knows what they're doing, or maybe they want to talk about it later. Sometimes people have already tested and come to us, but at any given time, we're working on several cases. We have several cases. Sometimes the ones that are unknown parentage and things like that, Jennifer and I do together, and we will throw every resource that we have at those. For most cases that are just, can you tell me something about my DNA or something about my family? We do a 3 to 5 hour consultation. And again, all of this is free. So, we run on donations basically. So.
And if people want to donate, how can they?
I don't know. How many people have we helped now? Like I can't even quantify that.
A lot.
And you have to understand, it's not just the people we're directly helping. I call it the Pied Piper effect. Like we're bringing people along the way. So, a lot of these people's matches, their best ones are also survivors or children of survivors themselves who think they have nobody. And then we build a tree for them and then we connect them to somebody else. So one of my favorites is we, had this. We can talk about the sisters, which is another powerful case, but one of the top matchers was convinced it couldn't be on this side of the family because everyone was lost on this side of the family. It has to be this other side. And of course, it was the side she thought everybody was lost. And we found all these records and we found a living relative. This was, I think she lived in the Boston area near me, a relative in Australia. And we were like, we'll send you a test immediately. And he said, I already tested. I got 100% Ashkenazi. We're like, did you turn on the matches? And then he turned them on, and he was a second cousin to this person. He was the top match for our clients. And I think they all kind of had a connection after that. So as we said, people are being pulled along the way. So it's impossible to quantify how many we've helped because I think they consider us helping them as well. So.
And you just mentioned donations. So for anyone who's watching who might want to donate, how can they do that?
The easiest thing is to go to our website, holocaustreunions.org, and there is a link on the website. There's a donate link. You can do it right from your computer. There's instructions there if you want to mail us a check. It's all on there, and we always appreciate any support. It's all tax deductible, and all the nitty gritty is explained on the website.
And you can know, the money, $20 helps us ship a kit, internationally, for example, like something like that, or it buys a record, from a cemetery. Like there's very quantifiable things in that way. But it's just what we've been able to do with people's generosity has been really powerful. So, it's a team effort here.
Now, we've talked a bit about some other families that you've researched, but have you found Holocaust survivors or family members who were murdered in the Holocaust in your own family trees?
Absolutely. I keep the sad running total spreadsheet for my own family, and I think we're over 80 people that I know about at this point. But I would be remiss not to mention that, this entire journey for me personally began with my own family, because in 2013, we learned that my husband's 95-year-old survivor grandmother, she sort of made like an offhand remark to me. Did I know that her mother had two older sisters who went to Chicago before World War I? And, this was a woman who had lost her parents, her grandparents, all of her siblings, all of her aunts and uncles, and like everybody. She had like two relatives that I knew of. And I always say, if it were a cartoon, my eyes would bug horizontally out of my head. Like, what are you talking about? You had two aunts that went to Chicago. And I became obsessed with finding out what happened to those two aunts who went to Chicago, because I thought, you have living relatives. And I tracked them down, and much to everybody's shock, we were able to introduce this 95-year-old survivor who had lost everybody to her three first cousins, who were alive and well and pushing up against 90. And it was amazing. And it had such a ripple effect through the whole family. So, so that story, really propelled a lot of this. And my mother-in-law was born during the war somewhere in the Ural Mountains, where they were, in a labor camp. So it's very front and center for me. But I have continued to work on my own family, and unfortunately have identified at least 80 people who perished.
In my case, I am not descendant from survivors, but I think it's really important to understand, I grew up, my great-grandparents were the immigrants. My grandparents were born here. They had some older siblings that were immigrated with their families. But I knew what the Holocaust was, but I didn't necessarily know that it touched my family. So until I really got into genealogy, I didn't realize that my great-grandfather had a half-brother and sister who perished with all of their families. I didn't realize, all of these different things. I found branches nobody talked about. It was just too painful in that sense. And I think why I mention this is there's a lot of people like me out there in the Jewish community who, think that, oh, I'm not a descendant of survivor, it doesn't affect me, but it's how far back you're digging, right? Once you get to your grandparents, great-grandparents, second great-grandparents, they had siblings, they had families. You're going to find somebody who perished. It's just a matter of when. So, that's why I encourage people to kind of dig in there. And, a lot of times we get messages from people who aren't survivors themselves, and they say, how can I help with this project? To be very clear, we don't have a proprietary database of any sense that wouldn't be beneficial to us. If you're testing an ancestry, you're doing your job, because if you match to somebody who we're helping, we're going to find you. So that's the best way to help in that regard.
Very cool. So, I feel like that's a good point in terms of a lot of Jews that I feel like I fall into that category, where I grew up, my latest immigrant ancestors were 1904.
Right.
So I never knew about that. And I had to stop tallying in my family because I have over 1,000 in my Nunes Vaz family who were murdered, and, all these different families. And it's just a matter of getting that far back.
Right.
I think one of the things that I feel very strongly about with this work, both personally and for the project, is I think a lot of people, a lot of Jews around the world, roughly of our generation, know that they had quote unquote relatives who must have perished. Or maybe, like Adina was saying, they don't believe they did, but they did, because everybody did. It's just a question of how close they are. But I remember having a really powerful reaction one day when I had an unidentified photograph that had been given to me, like I'm sure many people, in a box full of photographs. And there was an inscription on the back, but it only had some first names. And I did not know the last name of one of my grandfather's first cousins who perished. And I knew that this was her family. To make a long story short, I was able to, research, and I figured out who they were. And I just remember being struck. I got from JRI Poland the marriage record from Łódź of one of my cousins, who had been married as a young woman, 22, 23 years old before the war. And it just moved me so much to be able to think of her not as a tragic victim, but as a bride on her wedding day, looking forward to the future, that she was a person with a life and a life force and dreams and hopes and, annoyances and everything that comes with that. And I just was so happy that I was able to sort of rescue her from that obscurity in some tiny little way. Now I know exactly when she was born. I know exactly that, she was married at 6 o'clock in the evening on a certain day. And I feel like that's part of what we do with this work. It's to stop these people from being collapsed into a big anonymous sea of victims, and to give them back some of their dignity and agency as human beings. And some of that is just rescuing their names from obscurity. I've been saying all week, we started a consult last week for a woman who's the child of 2 survivors. I feel like this is such a typical example. She gave us her tree, quote unquote, to get started. And her tree included the names of both of her parents and their birth dates and dates of death. And that's all she knew. Literally did not know the names of her own grandparents. It is now 1 week later. We have a tree that goes back to 3rd and 4th grade grandparents on most of her lines. Like, it's all out there. And we're so happy to be able to resituate these people back in their histories. I always say it's like, to me, another cruelty of the Holocaust was it stole not only people's living relatives, but it stole their ability, or so they thought, to connect with their past. And that's a right that we would like to, that's a wrong that we would like to right.
It's absolutely amazing work that you both are doing. And I know the little bits that I've been able to do in my own family when I've connected with cousins who were from survivors, it's, they're amazed, like, oh my gosh, you found us, your cousin. But it was because they had tested. But it is very difficult sometimes to do this work, because we are dealing with Jewish DNA, which we 3 all know has a lot of issues. And I imagine a lot of people watching this probably know that too. But can you talk a little bit about, some of the things that you're up against that you aren't necessarily up against with other unknown parentage type cases?
Right. So, I always call doing Jewish genetic genealogy being thrown into the deep end of the pool. Because when I do a DNA basics talk for a non-Jewish group, it looks very, very different than the one that I'm going to do for the Jewish group. Like, the word endogamy is not going to come out of my mouth in a non-Jewish setting, unless it's maybe like French Canadian. But what I'm saying is that Jewish genealogists kind of have to start in that deep end of the pool, like sink or swim. So you have to understand what endogamy is. And what endogamy is effectively our ancestors, descend from, they'll say something like 330 people. It's probably closer to 1,000 or something like that. But over, 800 years or so, they're keeping it in the family. And they're all marrying cousins. And what happens there when you have a limited founder effect like that, you basically are going to be related to every other Jew that you come in contact with, which is why I think at Ancestry I'm up to 200,000 matches. Does that sound about right? Yeah. But, I'm not going to find a meaningful connection. I can say, these are the Jewish people, this is my family, but I'm not going to be able to trace 200,000 people on paper, not because I don't have the time, but because it's not possible. So we have kind of some tricks of the trade, I guess is the best way to explain it, that what we're looking at when we look at these matches is, people always say, look at matches above 100 centimorgans. Jennifer and I, for us, a lot of the matches we deal with are actually under 100 centimorgans. It's more focusing on long segments because larger segments tend to mean that it comes from a more recent common ancestor. So I'm much more interested in looking at a match of, say 100 centimorgans with a longest of 63, than one that's 100 centimorgans with a longest of 13, because one of them I'm going to be able to find, and one of them, no, I'm not. And I'm going to be spinning my wheels trying to figure it out. So really the trick is looking at the longest segments and also the ratio of segments. Sometimes we're going to struggle to find that match that maybe it only has a long of 67 and there's nothing else. Maybe that segment is an artifact of many, many years ago and, many generations ago. And what I really like to point out also is it's not always just the DNA. And I do other endogamy work because my mother-in-law's family is all French Canadian. They have lots of endogamy too. What makes them different than, most Jewish cases I'll take? Their trees go back to the 1600s, 1500s. I actually found my husband's first Irish ancestor from like 1600 something that went to Canada. They have the trees to say, oh, I'm related in 5 different ways, this, and this. Most Jewish trees we're dealing with, they might have grandparents and they're from Russia. They might not even know the maiden name of the grandmother. So it's a really, really different ballpark you're dealing with that. And then, of course, many of us are Jewish. I'm sure most of us are Jewish genealogists. You're dealing with name changes. You're dealing with records accessibility, being able to translate. There's just all these things that compound it. And then when you're dealing with the Holocaust, if you, first of all, you have the attitude for many people that there's nothing left to be had, leave it in the past. So you kind of have to break through that. But for some people, the ways we've reconstructed families, we're not using vital record. Like, what if there's no vital records? One of my favorite cases that we did, I think this is a great way to talk about unknown parentage, is we had a woman who, as a child, was smuggled out of the Bialystok ghetto. And, it's not very clear how she knew the bits and pieces of information that she had, but she knew she was connected to the names Kaplan and Shapiro. Okay, so, you're dealing with Jones and Smith here, okay? And the story kind of went that she must be connected. She literally traveled the world to figure out who her family was. And by some happenstance, and again, we're not sure because it kind of seems like somebody knew something but just wouldn't tell her. She met with this, guy, and it was understood that they were related, and she listed the surnames Kaplan and Shapiro. And he said, oh, I have a Shapiro line here. You must be related through here. So for years, they thought this was the connection. So people within that Shapiro line reached out to us and said, hey, we did all of our DNA. Can you make, heads or tails of this? We took it on. And what we found was, yes, she indeed had, Shapiros in her family, but they weren't Shapiros connected to the family that they thought. So we found the Shapiro family. We also found a Kaplan family. Okay, so all of this kind of worked out. But what I loved about this case is when DNA is doing what DNA is supposed to do, we had 4 very clear clusters of matches, which represent each grandparent. So I remember saying to Jennifer, we're going to find, whoever these parents are, one, it's going to be Kaplan, Shapiro, and these 2 other surnames. So we asked, we have a partnership with JRI Poland where they give us, spreadsheets of, records to help us out. And kind of a pro tip, not everything at JRI Poland is online. So if you have a town that and you have a surname, please reach out to them and they could give you more than what's available online. But we asked for, I think Kaplan and Shapiro in Bialystok. And lo and behold, there was a 1936 marriage record that had Kaplan, Shapiro, and one of the other surnames I had said, and the 4th one was blank, but I knew what it had to be. And we said, these are your parents. Like DNA did its thing. I think I remember reconstructing one of those surnames by through a Yisker book, where somebody remembered where everybody lived and drew a map of the houses. And 2 of those surnames were right next to each other because one of them, there was like, these are the resources we're using, right? We're not just finding, we have to really dig. We use a lot of testimonies that people leave with the Yad Vashem, Arelson archives, DP camp cards. We do a lot of tracing, ITS tracing for people, because some people don't even know that's a thing. So, you really have to get creative with unknown parentage cases, but with Holocaust era ones, you have to get really, really creative and think outside the box.
Yeah, it's amazing the vast array of resources that you really do have to utilize for this research, and knowing how many of these cases you all are taking on. I can imagine all of the little nooks and crannies of the archive world where you have to look to find that.
It's something new every day. We never know what's going to come in our inbox, and we have to, bone up quickly on new areas all the time. But it's fun. It keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, and that's why we love it, because I love a good puzzle. I don't know if I love a logic puzzle. Like, that's one of my favorite things. I think a lot of genetic genealogists in particular can share that sentiment, and that's what it is. And also, the research is never done. With Jackie, we had an interview with somebody the other day, and I was just like, oh, I'm going to look up and see, what else there is. And something else came online. That happened with Jennifer. She was at the beach, and MyHeritage announced some new database that was available. And she's like, I'm going to type this in and see, and it was like, voila, like all these records that sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So we have a lot of resources too. We have people helping us translate. We have, if we need help with like Romanian genealogy and we don't know, we reach out to somebody who knows a little bit more than us. So we see this as a collaborative effort. It's Jennifer and I are kind of at the helm, but we reach out to everybody that we think can help us to, we want to build a robust portfolio basically for all the people that we're helping.
I just want to add one thing as we're talking about this. I realized, and I saw one question in the chat that had something to do with this. Somebody was asking about, well, if the only person who survived is my great grandfather's brother, can that DNA be used to help? I want to make clear that all of this is like it all works together. Like, the better the DNA matches, the more we can build your tree. The more robust your tree, the better sense we can make of your DNA matches. And sometimes I'm thinking of a case that we had where we were helping a woman who had an incredible story where she learned after her mother died that her mother had been lying about who she was. And she was a Jew who had gone undercover and then never told her children. And we're in the process of tracking down some relatives for that woman, but they never took a DNA test, meaning once we sort of use the DNA as a jumping off point and we begin to build a tree, then we can see, oh, well, look at this. There was a second cousin who survived in Sweden. We need to find that person. That person may have never gone anywhere near a saliva vial to DNA test. So it's like a many-pronged approach. It's like you can... Okay, for example, this woman who came to us who did not know the names of her grandparents, right? You take a look at that woman's DNA match, and unless by chance the match has the same exact name as the maiden name of her mother or her, this woman's own maiden name, her father's surname, how are you going to recognize who any of those people are? Like, you need the infrastructure in place to start recognizing your more distant DNA matches. Now that I have, 16 surnames in play, I can revisit that match list. And of course, now some of those more distant matches start to click into place. So it all works together. And depending on what the goal of the client is, we may use any or all of those resources. Like, sometimes people are really interested in tracking down living relatives, no matter how distant. Sometimes people are really interested in finding the fates of a specific person, which we will assist with. Sometimes people really want, documents or, it's totally different. But I just wanted to make clear that we sometimes start with the DNA and then go outside the DNA. We sometimes start outside the DNA and then go into the DNA. Like, it depends on the specifics.
Yeah. And I want to be clear also with DNA, even within an endogamous community like Ashkenazi Jews, I still have third cousins who are reliably going to be third cousins. So if, descendants of my second great grandparents are testing, they're likely, 90% of the time are going to be captured by the DNA. There's a 10% of third cousins don't share any meaningful DNA. So that's why it's great for everyone to test, because it's, I kind of joke, the one good thing about endogamy is that if anyone's kind of got into Pro Tools, if you don't necessarily know if somebody's tested, but they have a tree, you can kind of go through, like we manage lots of kits, and you can see if that person's tested because we're all related to each other. So I do that personally. But everyone's DNA is helpful. It helps us, with our puzzle. So again, if you're, I don't descend from Holocaust survivors, but I have relatives who benefit from my DNA to help solve things.
Well, now I think what we'll do is we'll jump into some comments and questions from chat. We've had a lot of people saying hello. I won't go through all of those, but we have people from all over the country and all over the world. So to start out, Stephen Turner from Roslyn, New York, and Gescher, Galicia loves the Holocaust Reunion Project.
We love you too, Steve.
We love Gescher, Galicia, and Steve.
Yes.
We'll jump over here. Pearl Rakin, hi from Woodbridge, Virginia. I would still like to see if I could find some family relatives who might still be alive.
So if you should go to our website, if you have taken a DNA test, you can just email us. If not, please apply for a free DNA test. I tend to get those kits up pretty quickly. We have coupon codes. So basically we would give you a code to redeem yourself with a whole bunch of instructions. And then you would get your test and you take it. We need to be very clear. Again, we do not have our own database. So when we send you these kits, we don't automatically have access to anything regarding your kit. Your kit is between you and the company. So if you want us to see your results at a later time, you're going to have to reach out to us again and say, hey, I got my results. Will you do a consult for me? And we'll give you instructions for how to, give us access to your DNA and all these other, informed consent things. So, and it said, I think Pearl's asking, is it still possible to test for this? We have all these kits, so please apply for a kit. We have plenty. Again, Ancestry has been very kind to help because they care very deeply about at-risk history.
And just to be clear, we are offering tests to survivors and to their children. We cannot extend the offer to 2Gs.
3Gs.
What? I'm sorry?
You said 2Gs to 3Gs.
Sorry, it's been a long day. So, if you qualify, and there's lots of information on our website, there's an FAQ. If you're curious, we're happy to send you a test. There is a bit of a waiting list right now. We are trying to bring on additional support to make that wait time get shorter, but we're doing the best that we can and going the fastest that we can.
Very cool. Well, we have Alan here who said this is a wonderful service. A few years ago, my mom qualified. I'd previously tested her on other services, but thanks to this project, she got tested on Ancestry. Mm-hmm. And then I saw you had a follow-up too. As a result, found distant cousin connections to my mom. This branch didn't know anything about my mom's branch.
And we hear that all the time. Because again, and there are cases where maybe if we dig into the records long enough, like I mentioned, one of the first people who tested in our program thought she knew everybody, but she had a second cousin match because she didn't know her grandmother had a brother who immigrated. This happens all the time. And could we have figured it out from records? Maybe eventually, but the DNA kind of cut through everything and saved us hours and hours of work. If that match in Australia had gone beyond his pie chart and turned on his matches, he would have saved us months of work because he would have been right there at the top of the list. Yeah. So, as Jennifer said, DNA and the paper trail research, they balance each other. There's not really one without the other for the work that we're trying to do here. But often we hear this branch didn't know about my mom's branch. It happens all the time.
And then Robin says, I still do not accept that my father was one of 6 siblings who survived the Holocaust. I tested my DNA, have been researching and hoping a match comes through.
So, it's hard to speak to everybody's individual case. We're just, here. So if you're interested, definitely reach out to us. What we find sometimes is if people aren't familiar with how DNA analysis works, they might see a third cousin match or a second cousin not realize that it's a real match. They'll just say, I don't know any of these names. We get that a lot too. And then we reconnect it. But what we'll also say is maybe you don't have a match right now, but my ultimate goal in this program is to have two people totally separate test through our program and be relatively close matches to each other. We've gotten very close to that scenario, but you never know who's going to test. If we test enough people, maybe your top match is waiting to, be there.
Yeah. And of course, also getting into every available database to cast the widest net.
Yeah.
Because you never know which match tested where. Right.
And after, when people reach out to us after Ancestry, we encourage people to upload to MyHeritage, and if people can't do that, we also have an account in MyHeritage, and we're happy to do that for them. There's just, again, a lot of consents involved.
This next comment, I think this is the one that Jennifer had mentioned before, from Fran. My dad and a few of his cousins were all lost in the Holocaust. All his brothers and sisters were murdered, but he thought that his oldest brother may have survived. I've been searching on Ancestry and 23andMe and have found distant cousins that left prior to World War II. Can you help me? Which I guess kind of what you've advised already in terms of reaching out.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to say, and Jennifer can add to this, that sometimes people come with very specific questions. And what ends up happening is we answer questions that they didn't even know that they had. So we've had people, look for some, did my half brother survive, or can you find out his fate? But then with the DNA, we say, oh, did you know that your uncle survived and had this whole family? So, sometimes people they say, oh, the testimony says this, but I want to make sure. If descendants of that person have not tested, they're not going to appear in the database. And, maybe you have to wait, maybe you'll get lucky. Sometimes it's going to require paper trail research, but maybe your DNA is telling you something that you didn't even think of. So, that's what we're here for.
And then Susan says, taking off from Adina's comments, if your only paternal relative or potential relatives that survived the Holocaust would be descendants of siblings of great-grandparents, does DNA provide you a trail to follow?
That was the comment that I was, reacting to. And I just wanted to, I hope I explained that it's, it's a multi-pronged approach. We use it all. Just to add to what Adina just said, to find a specific person, meaning I am looking to see if my grandfather's brother survived, you would need a direct descendant of that person to DNA test to confirm that that particular person survived. But absent that, there may be things that we can do, to put in traces at various places and search various archives. There may be information about a person's fate that you weren't aware of. We had a woman reach out to us early on who said that she knew that her father was married before the war and had lost his wife and child, who would have been this woman's, half brother. And she said, I've always wondered about them. I don't know their names. I don't know, anything. She said, I've looked everywhere. Could you possibly help me? And I did one quick search in Yad Vashem, and the first wife's sister had left a testimony for her and the baby. And there was it took me under 30 seconds. So, sometimes it's just by no fault of their own that people just don't know where to look, that the information is out there. So, we're depending on the specifics of your question, we will mine your DNA matches, we will mine your tree, we will mine Holocaust archives, we will put it all together and try to provide people with more information. And one other thing I just wanted to make sure we mention, because to me, it's very important. Maybe it goes without saying, But in some cases, like the woman who did not know that her murdered grandmother had a brother who had come to New Jersey in 1913, that family can have artifacts, that family can have photographs, that family can have all the things that were lost to survivors, and that can be so meaningful. I think about my husband's grandmother. She was given like lace work that was made by her mother's sisters. She did not have a single photograph of her parents, but now she had a piece of lace that was made by her aunt, and that was beautiful. So that's what's so important about sometimes finding these more distant families.
And we have someone who has benefited from the service, Maxine Irvin. I have 14 DNA matches on ancestry of my third great grandfather that I wouldn't know about if not for Adina and Jennifer.
Thanks for coming, Maxine.
And then let's see, we have a question here. Hannah, is there anything similar to JRI Poland for Hungary?
I mean, there's
it's
not what?
Yeah, it's hard to answer that question. There's not a JRI Poland. There's not a JRI Hungary, but it depends on kind of where in Hungary. First of all, there are records available in different places, different groups. There are different SIGs with Jewish Gen that might be able to help you.
I was going to say the Hungarian Research Division of
Exactly.
Jewish Gen is amazing, and they have incredible records.
Right.
That's how we were able to solve the Jackie case. That was all entirely done through Jewish Gen.
Yeah, it was indexed. And there's also for Hungary a lot of civil registrations that have actually popped up more online recently. If you go on Family Search, those are really good resources as well. But again, it depends where in Hungary as well.
All right, so I see a lot of questions that are kind of the same stuff of can you help me? So I'm not going to read all.
So the answer is yes, we can help you. You just have to reach out to us, and we'll be honest with our time. We're trying. Yes, we request your patience because people say your whole operation. You're looking at the operation basically. We have a fiscal sponsor who does a lot of kind of the back end financial things, and we're bringing on more genealogy support, and we have volunteer translators, and but it's us, Jennifer and I we do all the things. So just be patient with us.
I will just say real quick, Jarrett, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I have to, just because my grandfather is Latvian, and I know a lot about Latvian records. For the person asking about how to find a record of what happened to a great-great-grandfather, I don't know the URL off the top of my head, but Google the Latvian Names Project. Mm-hmm. It is an unbelievable Holocaust resource for Latvia with detailed information about the fates of the vast majority of Latvian Jews. Yeah. Just Google Latvian Names Project.
So we have a question from Alan that I think is quite interesting. Any advice on how to get other family members to apply for tests? I'm having a hard time.
So, Jennifer and I want to be very clear. Like, we will shout from the rooftops how wonderful DNA is. Like, I would put my whole genome online. Like, I show anyone who's come to any of my presentations, I show a very beautiful chromosome painting of what I've covered so far of how I'm related to people. But with that said, we can love DNA, and many of us who are in the genealogy community love DNA, but it's not for everyone. And we do not want to coerce anyone into taking a test because, people, I think, panic about the wrong things here. Sometimes they think they're going to be cloned or something. I don't know what it is, but maybe somebody's not ready to find out that their father wasn't their father, or they have a surprise half sibling somewhere. And it's really important we respect their wishes. For us, what we tell people that we think the benefits outweigh any possible ramifications, but you should always read the terms of service for a company. If you tell your family members about our project and all the good it's doing with DNA, maybe that'll convince them. But, I try to be very respectful of people's concerns. And if the answer is no, I've seen too many people trick people into taking DNA tests, and it's not the right way to go. So I don't recommend that.
So let's see. We've got this question here. I think it was kind of answered earlier, but good way to bring it up again. Is there a way to see the project on the PPF website? I want to donate by check through a DAF and want to be sure it goes to the correct project.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I'm not sure what you mean by on the PPF website, but we can assure you that if you designate PPF using the information on our website as the recipient on your DAF, just put in the memo or note that it's for the Holocaust Reunion Project. We get donations from like that all the time. We literally got one just before we got on this call. And as long as you say to PPF that it is for the Holocaust Reunion Project, it gets to us. We can assure you. So
and if you want to send us a note, we always can make sure with them as well. But they're very good about that.
And then Santa Ninfa says, I'm a proud supporter of the project. The work you all are doing is amazing. I'm always moved by the poignant stories you share. I wish you so much success.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that's a sentiment we all, at least I definitely share. The work that both of you do are amazing. And, the mitzvah that you're creating for so many people. And yeah, it's just such great work. I'm so happy to be able to talk to you all about that today. I do notice that we are kind of coming up on the hour. So this is only an hour-long project. But I do want to thank you both so much for joining. And, if there's anything that you want to kind of promote about the project.
Yeah, I mean, the project, IAJGS, we're going to be there. We'll see you in Fort Wayne. If, you're you're really into genealogy, Jennifer and I will be at Roots Tech next week as well. Are you going to be there, Jarrett?
Oh yeah, I'll be there.
All right. So we're going to see you there. So we'll have a booth there. We are doing an online presentation about the project. I'm doing a few DNA Jewish genealogy talks in social media. So we'll be there. So if you're there, please visit us. We'll have candy.
I just wanted to say before we close, I just wanted to mention really quickly that this fall we solved an incredible case, but it really took the program in a new direction, and we don't know that if this will continue to happen, but we just wanted to mention it. And it's the case of Volodya Diskin, who was hidden in a Polish Catholic home in Lviv. She's 83 years old. She had a little bit of information about how she came to be saved. She thought she might know her surname, but that was about it. We used DNA. We solved her case. We found her birth certificate. We identified her parents. We built her a tree. But in a truly extraordinary turn of events, the paper trail also led us to the family of the woman who rescued her. And we brought them together on Zoom not long ago, and they are gearing up to meet in person in Paris next month. So we have assisted Volodya with completing her application to have this woman recognized as righteous among the nations at Yad Vashem. So that was really exciting for us because we never had a case that involved a rescuer before. So to watch it all come together was just amazing. And you asked what it's like when we tell people the news, and I can tell you, like, we cry a lot. It's just unbelievable. We smile a lot and we cry a lot.
Yeah, we swear a lot in the middle of the night. We always joke, like when we have our aha moments, there's like lots of caps and exclamation points and things. We have a few like screenshots of that, and I started this. My youngest is 5. I have 3 kids, which is why Jarrett's kindly saying we're going to cut off soon because I have to go get them. But I would be up at all hours. We'd be sending messages like Jennifer, when I'd see something, it'd be 2 a.m. I'd be sending her things. And I remember some of our best work is at midnight. So
I feel like that's a commonality amongst genealogists.
Exactly.
Like it's a night owl trait or something.
Yeah.
So.
Our husbands don't get it, but we have each other.
All right. It's 2:59. I'm using my last 60 seconds to address the message that just came in. We were told all the records were burnt. They weren't. You've been lied to. It's a myth.
If you take away anything from this presentation, let it be that, because we want to shout that from the rooftops. No records were systematically destroyed in that manner, and it's caused people to not even look. Of course, war happens and things happen, like Warsaw. We are missing a lot of records from the kind of the mid 20th century because of the bombings, but it wasn't because they were trying to destroy the records. It was just war was happening. So we're trying to eradicate that mindset. So please, that should be your takeaway.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, that myth persists outside of our community as well. You know, people are always talking about, oh, I can't do this because the courthouse burned. It's a very common myth.
Yeah.
Yes, records are missing. We're not going to suggest that they're not. But, you know, if you were told that the records don't exist, they do. Probably. And on that note.
Okay.
Well, thank you again both for joining. Thank you everybody for watching. We do hope to see you all at the IAJGS 45th conference in Fort Wayne in August.
We'll be there.
Bye, everybody.
Jarrett. Thanks everybody for stopping by.